Just how much the morally bankrupt hate the financially poor. Hi, I'm Scott.
Hi, I'm Mark.
And this is Church is Lame, the podcast where we try to fix the church by talking about the stupid things churches do that break the entire body.
Okay, so we're talking about chapter 11 this episode then?
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So let me say this before we get into the actual stories. We are 50-some, this is episode 55. We're 55 episodes in, and even I can hear that you and I are starting to sound a little bit like broken records, right?
Probably.
But here's the thing, is if we're going to do this podcast, and we're going to get on here week after week and talk about something, we're going to talk about the things that matter to God, because the things that matter to God should matter to the church.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that matters to God is caring for the poor, caring for the needy, having a bit of charity in our hearts and having a bit of charity in our lives. So this week brought some headlines that really brought this to a point for me to where I really just wanted to drill down on this.
Okay.
All right. So first article, Relevant Magazine. The headline is Brett Favre did what now? And let me just stop here. Favre. In what universe is that pronounced Favre?
In the French universe?
Oh my gosh. No, because there is an NFL player who's Favre and his name is Favre, right?
Well, it's because he's a pervert.
Gosh. Okay. Anyway, words is hard. And apparently for Brett Favre, English is hard. But anyway, Brett Favre, once again, we're not a sports show. We're not a politics show. But we are a show that we talk about how the church is broken. And one of the way church is broken is when celebrities wear their Christianity on their sleeves, but then act anything other than Christ-like. And so we have Brett Favre here wanting to, let me make sure I get this right. He wanted to build a volleyball court, something to do with his daughter being in volleyball or something. Okay. So he works with the former governor of Mississippi. Okay. So the former governor of Mississippi and Brett Favre worked together to funnel millions of dollars away from the welfare fund that's intended to benefit the state's poorest people and take those millions of dollars to fund a volleyball, not a volleyball court, not a volleyball park, a volleyball stadium.
What? I've never even heard of such a thing.
Who need that? When people talk about somewhere, when you make the drive from Chicago to Indianapolis, you pass this bicycle stadium. It's like a racetrack for bicycles. It's like who's paying money for this stuff?
In this country, I don't know. There's not a lot of velodromes in the United States.
Yeah, I understand volleyball's big in college, and I understand that it's an Olympic sport. And it has its place, and I have nothing against it. I personally love watching volleyball. I think it's great. I think there are some sports where athletes are athletes, and there are some sports where athletes are a little questionable. Is this really athletic, or is this just kind of long and boring?
Yeah, I'm going to go with, if you are involved in the process of diverting funds away from helping the poor and the needy, then you are by definition an a-hole.
Yes. Yeah. So that's really to the point of this is, if volleyball's important to you, great. Have a bake sale. Have one of those dinners where you charge $500 a plate, and everybody who comes to the dinner throws their money in and gets to shake hands with Brett Favre, and take
don't
your picture
forget the dry chicken. That's the important part.
Yes, the veal. Have the veal. Yeah. No. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's a million ways to fund this, but there's something about the entrepreneurial American psyche that loves taking away from the poor, as if they have anything that can more, as if there's a whole lot to take away from them in the first place. Let's take away any sort of compassion, any compassion that exists. Let's find it and let's suck it back,
Yeah. And there's this whole big world right around this sort of thing, building stadiums and whatnot that can, that could derail this conversation. So I'm not going to go there. But very often, not just this stadium, but other stadiums are made using public funds.
Yeah.
For what ultimately is an endeavor that's meant to make money, but not for the public.
Right.
So what is there is no justification in my mind for doing this kind of thing, when you could be building up a community's and providing, resources for things like drug rehab,
Right.
crisis, pregnancy centers and things like that for people that need emergency resources, hospitals, getting rid of food deserts and all that.
Yeah, but you're just talking nonsense now. You're talking about real solutions to real problems, and yeah,
I'm sorry.
you're not talking about like, hey, how many people can we get to confess their faith in Christ? You actually want to fix real problems out there.
Yeah, well, what was the other episode we did? Like, Christians are bothered, but they can't be bothered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Okay, so that was just kind of like an interesting, like, celebrity kind of moment, a celebrity Christian acting unchristlike. Who would have thought? Who would have imagined that? But the second headline that came across my radar this week is really kind of more to the point of the actual experience I have here in one of the richest suburbs of Chicago where I live. Okay.
Okay.
This was reported by Relevant Magazine. Evangelical Report. Yeah, put that news little ticker thing. Like, fighting climate change is a great way to love the poor. Like, I literally had like that face palm moment. Like, this is how much we hate poor people and how much we don't want to do anything for them is we will find any adjacent topic we can and call it loving the poor, So let me give a little bit of background here. So ever since we've had this talk, ever since we've like understood climate change, we understand that on average, the temperature of the earth is rising at a rate faster than it ever has in history. Not only have we been talking about climate change as climate change, but because everything affects the poor harder than it affects everybody else, there's also been a years-long discussion, like years and years and years, about how climate change is going to affect the poor. So not only is this an example of like the church finding a way once again to pull back any compassion for the poor they have, but it's like another example of, well, hey church, let's not talk about how late you are to the party and just be glad that you came. Like, to finally realizing that climate change affects the poor,
And
good for
that's
you.
not
Golf
even
claps,
like the biggest, stupidity here.
Yeah.
Right. It's just that, to an extent, doing things that are going to fight climate change are going to help the poor.
Yeah.
But then there's the very real climate change effects.
Yeah.
So, when you don't have places that people can not be outside.
Yeah.
And so ending poverty goes a long way to helping climate change.
Yeah.
Because, when you have like these, when you look at, I think of like New Delhi, right? You go to New Delhi and you can see that like there's these giant encampments of just deep poverty, and
Right.
they're burning things, a lot of dung, because it's an available resource. And like whatever trash they can find, like they'll burn that for heat and to cook and whatnot. And that creates horrible pollution. You know, it's like, well, if you got rid of the poverty, then they wouldn't have to do that. And so it's like, I feel like like just the way people find to reverse the equation is just like the worst to me.
Yeah. I was I was watching a science presentation on climate change and making the assumption that we make no significant changes to the way we do things. We are within 30 to 50 years of the hottest areas of the world becoming those areas where it's literally too dangerous to walk outside. And we are 30 to 50 years away from the coastal areas where everybody likes to live, from melting ice, creating the water levels rising as to make those areas uninhabitable. 30 to 50 years.
Which is like, that's just madness to me. I mean, especially since like we've already talked about, that just aspects like, we've been given quote unquote dominion over the earth, right? Like that was part of our punishment for disobeying God, was to try to take care of this thing. And, and if our best efforts at taking care of the earth are not going to live up to God, then like failing to even do our best is just the worst. I mean, it's so terrible that, and then the arguments that we can get in with fellow Christians about like whether or not climate change is even real. Like that's just a craziness too, to me. It's like we can have these fights with people in the
Yeah.
church over what should be like, oh, hey, there's no ice caps left,
Right. So I want to get away from climate change because I want to get back to charity.
Yeah.
Like, so here we are, like you and I are in this very wealthy suburb of Chicago. And I don't know about every church, but every church that I've been to recently, there is no program that systematically clothes the naked, that systematically feeds the hungry, that systematically gives shelter to poor people in the wintertime. But every church that I've been to recently has a program where they fill backpacks for the upcoming school season. That's how much we hate helping poor people.
Like, we can help poor kids because it's not their fault that they're poor, but we don't want to help the parents.
Exactly right. We just hate the idea of a free handout to adults. There's just something about it that drives us crazy. But I wanted to put up a list here of Bible verses that have to do with the importance of charity. And I didn't like none of these Bible verses that you're seeing, Hebrews, Proverbs, Isaiah, Matthew. None of these Bible verses are ones where you have to go, well, let's see what the fuller context is, Like, these are all, like, really straightforward, What you do for others, God will do for you. Like, pretty straightforward. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just found a handful of them because the other thing I wanted to say is that the Bible speaks so much about charity from front to back, Old Testament, New Testament, Pentateuch, wherever you open your Bible, there is going to be a verse that talks about the importance of charity in my life and yours. But what do we spend all of our time talking about? We spend all of our time talking about the evils of homosexuality, not really covered that much in the Bible. The evils of abortion, not really covered that much in the Bible, So when we talk about how does this break the church, if we are going to be claimed to be people who follow after Jesus, who cares about what he cares about, then we need to do the things that he tells us to do.
Yeah.
And one of the things the Bible tells us to do more than almost anything else is live a life of charity.
And, I think we need to bring in what Jesus said. It's like, whatever you do for the least of these, you've done for me. Whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do for me.
Yeah.
So these people that, so many, especially on like the more, evangelical side of Christianity, tends to get really caught up on, like means testing. Like, do you deserve my help? And it's just like, well, that's Jesus. You're asking, does Jesus deserve my help?
Yeah.
If you remember to put it in those terms, it makes any excuse we can come up with not to help them seem really satanic.
Right. And it also betrays their bad theology, right? Like, I'm going to look at you and I'm going to ascertain whether or not you deserve my help, my charity. And what that reveals is that when I look at myself, I see myself as someone who deserves the grace of God. You know what I mean? And like, we totally forget that, oh, no. We're sinners too. We are totally undeserving of the grace of God. And it is only the grace of God through the work of Jesus on the cross that allows us to have this relationship with him, And we totally forget all that because we're still stuck in this mindset of, I need to keep what's mine and you don't deserve any sort of compassion from the world around you.
I think that'll preach.
I think so. So that was my big axe this week. I don't even think it's an axe to grind to say, hey, I pulled out 20 verses without even breaking a sweat. Like, I found those 20 verses in literally the first 30 seconds of searching for verses, right?
Yeah.
I didn't like,
and I have to like argue, like, just searching for verses because like, that's me. Right. But yeah, like searching for verses is a place to start, but like actually just like, read the Gospels and like pay really good attention to who Jesus is and how he treats people.
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't need to be any harder than that.
It really doesn't. Like, have charity in your heart, have charity in your life,
Yeah.
and it would, and I guarantee you that, that you will feel at peace with yourself. You will feel at peace with others. You'll feel peace with God. Guaranteed. All right, moving on. Okay, so just a couple other quick headlines about stupid things Christians do that break the entire body.
Okay.
This is from ChristianPost.com. Father, wife, 3 children found fatally shot at Maryland home. Once again, a headline that was so poorly written. This is a missionary, and this is a murder-suicide.
Oh,
So the father, shoots his wife and kids, shoots himself, right? Missionary. What's a missionary? For the purposes of my conversation, let me define missionary this way. One who goes out and shares the good news. And so, this breaks the church because, once again, we can't have that radical transparency. We can't be real with the world and with our church about who we really are, how we're hurting, how there's dark parts in our lives, how there's things that we haven't made peace with yet, And here we are, there's this guy out there who really should not be a missionary because he doesn't believe the good news himself. And yet we've put him in a place where that's what he has to do,
I mean, it might be unfair
yeah.
to say he doesn't believe the good news himself because, I mean, all of us can be pushed into despair for something,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, for me, this is more about the double-edged sword,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there's this person on one hand living one life, but his inner life is in total turmoil,
Yeah.
And so the person with the life of inner turmoil should not be living the life of outer enlightenment, So that's where I am with that. So, all right. Last one, as far as weird headlines that break the body. Pastor files lawsuit against police after arrested for watering neighbors' plants. And we can thank the good folks at Relevant Magazine for this. Pastor Michael Jennings was arrested after white neighbors called the police because he was watering his neighbor's lawn.
Yeah,
So this one,
that's a felony in every state, right?
I don't know. Like some places are weird. I would have no guesses as to whether or not that's really a felony to water your neighbor's lawn because some places have weird laws.
Some places do have weird laws, but I'm seriously doubtful that anybody forbids, watering your neighbor's lawns. And if they do forbid it, then, I encourage you to break that law because it's an unjust law.
Yeah. I'm concerned about this one because I feel like there's a double-edged sword to this, right? On one hand, this seems like a good idea. Look, I am, as a Jesus follower, I am about shining light on injustice and pushing against it in whatever form it takes, right? And so when we see things like the injustice of systematic racism and police profiling, as a follower of Jesus, I push back against it, right? So it on the one hand, it seems righteous and it seems appropriate. But then the article goes on to explain how his lawsuit also includes an undisclosed amount of money that he's seeking for reparations, he even goes as far to say for PTSD, And so it muddies the water. Like, why are you doing this? Are you doing this because as a follower of Jesus, you have decided to push back against all unrighteousness? Or are you doing this because there's a cash incentive at the end of the rainbow?
Yeah, and until that point, it's like, this seems kind of like one of those things like, you're trying to fight against that racial injustice. So you go take it to court because that's where you can, have these issues addressed in a helpful way, hopefully a helpful way.
Yeah.
But then it's like, oh yeah, I want to be recompensed, for damages. And it's like, I'm not going to disclose the amount. It's like, oh, that just makes me feel dirty.
Yeah.
Like you're a Christian, be transparent about what you're trying to accomplish.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's kind of where I land on this is like take the money out of this and just do the lawsuit and get it on record that you've got a police department that is racial profiling. That where there are problems, there are gaps in training and there are gaps in methodology, and get them to fix it. That's really the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, is to have a more just police force.
Yeah, and I think as Christians, you need to be very careful about how you're engaging the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
What are you using it for? Because some of these people who are like, well, I'm going to sue the county so I can keep my job where I refuse to follow the county rules and issue marriage licenses. It's like, no, if that's against your Christian beliefs, don't work there. You're not entitled to that.
Yeah.
But if it's a case where you can actually affect real systemic change to help your neighbor, I'm okay with that. I'm good with that.
Yeah. Great. All right, let's move along here. I'm starting a new segment. Stupid is as stupid reports.
Oh, that sounds really disturbing.
And so I don't know if we can grab a snippet of something that sounds sort of like Forrest Gump music. I don't know. I don't even know what Forrest Gump music means. But like in my mind,
No.
it's the Forrest Gump voice. Mama used to say, stupid is as stupid reports. So I actually had two articles, but we talked about one of them on our last episode. So I'll just talk about the one. ChristianPost.com. More voters see midterms as a referendum on Biden. And it's so I'm a little bit of a political junkie. I'll admit it. I try not to bring it onto the show, but I'm sure it bleeds in. But here's the deal. Every midterm is a referendum on the sitting president from the beginning of time. He's halfway through his presidency. We're going to have an election. It has very little to do with the actual candidates that are running for their particular races. And it has a lot to do with how you feel about the president, whoever is in that White House at the moment. The last midterm was about President Trump, The last midterm before that, the last two midterms before that were about Obama, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's the way every midterm is. And so this writer, Relevant Magazine whoever wrote this didn't even want their name in the byline. It just says written by Relevant Magazine. The article is so dumb that whoever this assignment was given to didn't even want their name in the byline. That's how dumb this article is.
And, I don't want to, jump to conclusions on that. But at the same time, I'm tired of seeing Christian news sources, how they report on political issues.
Yeah.
Because, you can tell exactly who CBN wants to be like running and winning. It's like, you can tell because how they report. Just forget about it.
Yeah.
Either report it neutrally or don't report it at all, or state outright, what, like at the beginning of your article, state what your biases are. Because I'm sorry, you're a Christian, just own it.
Yep. Okay. So moving on, real persecution watch. There are lots of things in America that are frustrating. When you speak up for your faith, people tend to push back. Nothing wrong with pushback. It's part of America. I get to say my piece. You get to say your piece. And sometimes that causes friction. Friction is not persecution. There's real persecution in other parts of the world. And as long as we're talking about things that break the church, we're going to make sure to highlight where real persecution is going on. Okay? So 5 Christian evangelists thrown off a boat and drowned in Uganda.
Well, that's a bit extreme.
Yeah, so speaks for itself. Kind of makes like you having to, read a book written by an atheist in high school in a different perspective. Okay?
Yeah.
And then church security guard killed, pastor kidnapped in Nigeria. I don't know what it is about Nigeria, but right now, in particular, Nigeria seems to be a real, what do they call that? Like the center
Powder
point
keg?
what do they call the center point of an earthquake? The epicenter.
Epicenter.
Right. It really seems to be an epicenter of Christian persecution. So, so if you're the praying sort, and you want to pray about something significant, there's your significant thing. There are people being kidnapped. They're being killed for their faith in Jesus. So if you want to complain about, your Bible not being hung at the front door of every public school in America, you can complain about it, but let's just not call it persecution. Okay? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I think that kind of goes. I think that's kind of it for me. Is that it for you?
That's it for me. I guess there is one thing I would like to add.
Uh-oh.
I know. But it's just that, every once in a while, I cannot get the image of Rob Bell out of my head.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was I was just watching Big Think. Big Think is a YouTube channel. It's great. Like a lot of these, not only recognized minds in the areas of expertise, but popular minds in the area of their expertise make these varied videos on various topics. And I just saw a Big Think video about what happens when we die. And Rob Bell was on there.
Oh, that's fun.
And yeah, he did a very short and succinct, but very well explanation of how in the New Testament Jesus talks about Gehenna, right?
Yes.
And from Rob's point of view, Rob believes that this is actually an actual place where like a garbage heap, a place where things were burned, a place where you didn't want to be because it was such a terrible place, right? And how that now gets equated to being like a metaphysical or spiritual hell instead. So yeah, so like once again, just a reminder that Rob Bell has this great way of thinking and enunciating the spiritual side of what the Bible has to say, and not necessarily the literal machinations of what the Bible has to say.
Well, I have nothing to add there.
So Rob, we're waiting. We're waiting.
Yeah, I want Rob to add to that.
Yes.
And
Yes,
that's
indeed.
basically why.
Yeah, not much to say this week about subscribers and comments, but you're out there. We know you're out there because we keep seeing our subscriber counts rise, and we do keep getting comments. Some of the comments are starting to turn into conversations. So I'm not necessarily excited about throwing those in there, but we always appreciate the interaction we have with our fans, whether our fans, that's a weird word to use right now. Followers, our followers, right? So whether that's on Facebook or through podcasts or whether that's through YouTube, we love the interaction. You know, the thumbs up button, the thumbs down button, the comments, the subscribes, the notifications. Click all those buttons. Click, 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 click. And, if you want to get a message to us and you want us to see it right away, feel free to send us an email, churcheslanepodcast@gmail.com.
And with that, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.